You were in the car that night, Marcus. What happened?
I wasn't there.
Your blood was on the dashboard.
Must be a mistake.
The Reynolds called you at 11:05 p.m. Traffic cam had your SUV by the lake minutes later.
That was a coincidence?
Then how'd you know the windows were up when we pulled the Fusion out?
I want a lawyer.
Good, because you'll need one.
On the evening of August 5, 2015, James and Sarah Reynolds departed their residence in a charcoal grey 2011 Ford Fusion, leaving their two small sons asleep in their suburban Nashville, Tennessee home. Approximately 25 minutes later, a convenience store security camera captured their final known images at 10:45 p.m. No sign of a collision, no vehicle debris, no tangible leads ever surfaced. Law enforcement conducted extensive searches for weeks around Percy Priest Lake, but returned with nothing. The family was tormented by painful speculation that perhaps James and Sarah had chosen to disappear and begin anew. Whispers in the community spoke of obligations to a shadowy figure. Their two boys grew up shrouded in grief and uncertainty, perpetually haunted by the question of their parents' whereabouts. Then, in 2023, a private dive team made the decision to rescan the lake with state-of-the-art sonar. Beneath layers of silt, they discovered a grey sedan, preserved for nearly a decade. The car's doors were still shut, seatbelts fastened, but an unexplained blood smear on the dashboard altered the entire narrative. It did not belong to James or Sarah. Another individual had been in the vehicle that night. Someone who understood how to orchestrate a scene to mimic a flawless accident. Someone who could wait, believing their crime would remain concealed forever. Before we delve into this story, remember to subscribe to the channel and enable notifications to stay informed on the latest developments in Unsolved Mysteries. Nashville, Tennessee. The night of August 5, 2015. The oppressive heat of a southern summer hung heavily in the air. Humidity rose from the earth like a dense mist. Gusts of wind, heavy with the scent of impending rain, swept through the streets. The rustling of leaves signaled an approaching storm. In a modest home on a tree-lined suburban street, the soft glow of a hallway nightlight cast long shadows on the hardwood floor as James and Sarah Reynolds quietly exited, closing the door behind them, their two young sons sound asleep in their rooms. The steady hum of the central air conditioning filled the silence, the faint smell of baby shampoo lingering. The house was as orderly as any other night, save for the absence of the couple. A charcoal grey 2011 Ford Fusion was parked in the driveway, its paint reflecting the amber glow of a nearby street lamp. At precisely 10:20 p.m., the engine turned over, its headlights cutting two bright paths through the thick darkness as the car pulled away from the quiet curb, merging onto the southbound lanes of I-24, where sparse late-night traffic flowed. The highway was mostly silent, the sound of tires on warm asphalt mixing with distant thunder. On a secluded stretch, a late-shift delivery driver would later report briefly seeing a grey Fusion pulled onto the shoulder, its hood raised as if experiencing mechanical failure. A faint glow, perhaps from a cell phone or flashlight, illuminated two figures near the car, but the scene vanished in an instant as the driver continued into the night. Not far from there, at a 24-hour convenience store, security cameras captured the last images of James and Sarah. The footage lasted just under 3 minutes. James was at the counter, holding a bottle of soda, his expression weary. Sarah stood beside him, her fingers rapidly typing on her phone, occasionally glancing out the glass doors with a look of concern before the automatic doors swished shut behind them. It was the final time they were seen in any recorded footage. After 11:10 p.m., both of their cell phones simultaneously lost signal. The last GPS ping was recorded on the northern edge of Percy Priest Lake. Then, nothing. No further signals, as if the night and the gathering storm had swallowed them and their car whole, leaving a void of unanswered questions in the heart of Nashville. The following morning, That void rapidly transformed into alarm. The Reynolds' young sons awoke and wandered into the kitchen looking for their parents, but the house was eerily still. The breakfast table was empty. There was no familiar sound of coffee brewing, no bustling morning routine. Their maternal aunt, who lived nearby, stopped by for a planned visit and immediately sensed something was wrong. The master bed was neatly made, the comforter undisturbed, indicating it hadn't been slept in. The garage was empty, the grey Fusion gone. With trembling hands, she called James's phone, then Sarah's, only to be met with a cold, automated message that the subscribers were unreachable. A wave of dread washed over her, and she immediately contacted the local police. The call reached the Davidson County Sheriff's Office just after 8:30 a.m. Sheriff Walter Briggs, a law enforcement veteran with over 2 decades of experience, immediately recognized the severity of the situation. The first hours of a missing persons case are the most critical for finding leads. Briggs quickly mobilized resources. One team patrolled I-24, checking rest stops and side roads. A Marine unit deployed boats to Percy Priest Lake, searching the area where the phone signals had died. Another group began canvassing the neighborhood, speaking with neighbors, friends, and colleagues. Meanwhile, the Reynolds family waited in agonizing tension. Calls to hospitals, morgues, and other police departments yielded no results. By early afternoon, the police tech unit delivered a crucial piece of evidence. Security footage from the convenience store off I-24 showed James and Sarah at 10:45 p.m. the previous night. In the video, James, in a dark polo shirt, held a recently purchased drink, looking tired but calm. Sarah stood next to him, eyes fixed on her phone, occasionally looking out the glass doors with a worried expression. No strangers appeared in the frame. No signs of a struggle. As the automatic door closed behind them, the Fusion's headlights flicked on and it pulled away. That was their last captured image. Police immediately reviewed dozens of other cameras along the I-24 corridor, from traffic cams to business security feeds, but found no further trace of the Fusion. The car seemed to have vanished into thin air after leaving the store. On the first day, the search effort was at its peak. Police helicopters circled over the lake. 9 units used items from the Reynolds home to pick up a scent. Divers plunged into suspected areas near the shoreline. All returned empty-handed. No skid marks, no shattered glass, no tire tracks, nothing to indicate an accident. The vast expanse of water merely reflected the stormy sky, as if swallowing all answers. By day's end, Sheriff Briggs faced the press in a brief conference, his voice grave. "We cannot yet determine what happened to the Reynolds," he stated. He outlined 3 possibilities. They may have left voluntarily, though this seemed highly unlikely given their 2 young children. They could have been involved in an accident, either on the road or in the lake, though no physical evidence supported this. Or, in the worst-case scenario, a crime had been committed. All 3 possibilities remained open, yet none were conclusive. The community of Nashville began to buzz with rumors, spreading through coffee shops, grocery stores, and churches. Some suggested they had fled from debts. Others insisted it was an abduction. The Reynolds family sank deeper into despair, holding the young boys, unable to answer their repeated questions. When are Mommy and Daddy coming home? As darkness fell over the city once more, the mysterious disappearance of James and Sarah Reynolds officially became a case that would haunt Middle Tennessee for years to come. The search for James and Sarah Reynolds moved into its second day with no clear breakthroughs. That morning, the investigative team broadened its scope, focusing on gathering information from those closest to the couple. Sheriff Walter Briggs assigned a team of investigators, including state troopers, to conduct door-to-door interviews in the Reynolds neighborhood. Neighbors consistently described James and Sarah as a kind, low-conflict couple, always friendly and engaged in their community. They were deeply devoted to their children, active in their local community center, and showed no indications of wanting to abandon their family. "There's no way they'd just leave those boys behind," one neighbor stated firmly, her eyes red with concern. This widespread conviction quickly dismantled the first theory presented at the initial press conference: voluntary abandonment. The investigation then shifted to colleagues and close friends. James worked as a project manager for a mid-sized tech firm in downtown Nashville, described by co-workers as diligent, organized, and somewhat introverted, preferring to head straight home after work. Sarah worked part-time as a librarian at the local elementary school, known for her patience and gentle demeanor with the children. Both had stable incomes and minimal debt outside of their mortgage, which was nearly paid off. Bank records showed no unusual activity. James's colleagues mentioned he was recently assigned to a promising new project that would likely lead to a promotion. Sarah's best friend recalled her excitedly planning a family trip to the Great Smoky Mountains for the fall. These details made the notion of them fleeing increasingly implausible. While the interview team worked, the technical unit analyzed telecommunications data. Cell towers along I-24 tracked James's phone moving south from Nashville around 10:25 p.m. Sarah's phone last pinged at 11:10 p.m. near the northern shore of Percy Priest Lake. After that, both devices went completely silent. No further signals. This 45-minute gap, technicians noted, was critical, the time between leaving the convenience store and vanishing from the network. This reinforced the possibility they had stopped at the lake, but the reason for their disappearance remained a mystery. Concurrently, another team reviewed the couple's financial activity. Bank reports showed no credit card transactions or unusual cash withdrawals after August 5. Their accounts were untouched, with that month's paychecks still deposited. Individuals planning to disappear typically make financial preparations, withdrawing cash or closing accounts. Here, there was nothing. Everything stopped abruptly, like a film reel snapping in half. The Reynolds family was called to the sheriff's office to provide additional details. The aunt reiterated that her brother-in-law and sister-in-law had no reason to abandon their children. James lived for those boys. Sarah wouldn't go to the grocery store without them. If you tell me they left on their own, I'm telling you that's impossible. Her voice broke, but her resolve was steel, compelling the police to officially note: family strongly rejects abandonment theory. Within 2 days, over 40 people were interviewed, from next-door neighbors to childhood friends. No one suggested a motive for leaving, nor had they heard of any recent arguments or threats in the couple's lives. Instead, they all emphasized the couple's simple lifestyle, their love for their children, and their unfulfilled future plans. By late afternoon on August 7th, Sheriff Briggs sat in the briefing room, staring at a large map spread across the table. Red pushpins marked the areas already searched along I-24 and around Percy Priest Lake. Small turnoffs into the woods, boat launches, all had yielded nothing. He tapped the table, feeling the weight of time pressing down. The media hounded them with relentless questions, while the Reynolds family clung to a fragile hope. "We need to figure out what happened in that 45-minute window," he told his team. "That's the key." The initial investigation, rather than narrowing the possibilities, had instead opened more shadows. The fusion had vanished with 2 people inside, leaving behind no physical evidence, no financial trail, no digital breadcrumbs, only scattered eyewitness accounts, a final GPS ping by the lake, and a family in crisis. This absolute silence, no car, no money, no signals, made the police realize this was no ordinary missing persons case. It was potentially the beginning of something far more sinister. The notes on Sheriff Walter Briggs's map were quickly translated into action. From the morning of August 8, 2015, a large-scale search operation was launched around Percy Priest Lake. State police helicopters circled overhead, their infrared cameras scanning the thousands of acres of water for any metallic reflections. On the water, Rubber boats and John boats from the Marine Unit divided the area into grids, dropping marker buoys and using the department's aging sonar equipment to sweep the lake bed. Professional divers from Nashville Metro arrived with oxygen tanks and high-powered lights, plunging into areas flagged by the sonar. But each dive, each tense hour spent underwater, yielded only disappointment. They discovered submerged tree trunks, chunks of concrete from old construction projects, abandoned fishing boats, and even the carcasses of deer trapped in the mud. But there was no sign of the charcoal grey Ford Fusion or the bodies of the missing couple. The search area was then expanded. Dirt access roads along the lake's perimeter were checked for any signs of braking or tire tracks, but the heavy rain on the night of the disappearance had washed away any potential evidence. Local fishermen who frequented the lake were questioned, but they only recalled the thunder and strong winds that night. No one reported seeing a car plunge into the water or hearing any unusual sounds. The lack of clarity turned every effort into a search in the dark. For 3 consecutive days, the search teams worked nearly around the clock. Local media covered the story extensively. Nashville news stations broadcast live footage from helicopters circling the lake, police cruisers lining the shore, and interviews with anxious residents. How can 2 people in a car simply vanish? One WTVF report concluded, leaving viewers with a sense of profound unease. Meanwhile, the Reynolds family maintained a vigil by the lakeshore, offering silent prayers each time a diver surfaced. But time and again, the teams would shake their heads, reporting they had found nothing. By the end of the first week, the initial fragile hope began to curdle into despair. Sheriff Briggs, while remaining resolute in front of the cameras, felt the crushing pressure. He knew public attention was a fickle thing, and the case was at risk of fading into obscurity. And it did. After 2 weeks with no breakthroughs, news about James and Sarah was gradually replaced by other stories: a major political scandal, a devastating tornado in a neighboring county. Missing person posters remained taped to streetlights and community bulletin boards, but the initial fervor had cooled. In the case file, the pages of reports stopped accumulating. All available data, the convenience store footage, the cell tower records, the neighbor interviews, had been exhausted. No bodies, no car, no crime scene, Briggs wrote in bold letters in his personal log. No physical evidence, no solid leads. The team continued their routine work, but they all knew the case was slipping into a dead end. By the second month, the official search was scaled back significantly. Helicopters were reassigned. The old sonar equipment was packed away. Only sporadic dive operations were conducted when a local boater reported seeing something unusual underwater. The police vowed to never close the case, but limited budgets and manpower forced resources to be allocated to more active investigations. The Reynolds file was labeled inactive, pending new evidence, awaiting a break that might never come. For the family, the pain only grew heavier. The 2 young boys would ask their aunt every night, "When are Mom and Dad coming back?" She could only hold them tightly, offering no answers. The people of Nashville grew accustomed to the case's silence, occasionally referencing it as a local tragedy before moving on, much like the surface of the lake itself, where helicopters, boats, and divers had tried everything and found nothing. Thus, the Reynolds case stalled, temporarily closed like an unfinished sentence in the community's memory, waiting for someone, someday, to unearth its buried truth. By 2016, with all search efforts having yielded no results, the disappearance of James and Sarah Reynolds was officially classified as a cold case within the Davidson County Sheriff's Office. Thick folders containing hundreds of pages of reports, photographs, and witness statements were sealed and stored in a records room in the basement of the Nashville Police Headquarters. The name Reynolds transitioned from daily news headlines to a labeled tab in a law enforcement archive. For the police, it was a painful admission of failure. Despite deploying helicopters, divers, and sonar, they had returned empty-handed. For the community, it was an unresolved void, fostering a quiet unease that a family could vanish without a trace in the heart of their city. The Reynolds family refused to accept the silence. Each year on August 5th, relatives and friends gathered at the community center where James and Sarah had been regulars. A simple memorial service was held. A few candles were lit, a framed photo of the couple's wedding day placed on a table. Their sons would sit quietly, holding their aunt's hands. They prayed for a miracle, for answers, or at least for a clue that would bring an end to the relentless questioning. Year after year, the ceremony became a somber tradition, a way to keep the memory alive and a reminder that the case was never truly closed. Liam and Noah, James and Sarah's sons, grew up in the shadow of this loss. When their parents vanished, Liam was just 7 years old, and Noah was only 5. They missed their parents driving them to school, playing catch with James in the backyard after work, and Sarah's bedtime stories. "Where are Mom and Dad?" became a silent ache that lingered in their eyes. In middle school, Liam avoided family tree projects, while Noah would quietly hide the Father's Day and Mother's Day cards his classmates made. They grew up with an invisible scar, feeling as though a part of them was missing at every milestone. Nashville did not forget entirely. The Reynolds disappearance became one of the city's most poignant mysteries. People whispered about it at farmers' markets, in diners, and after church services. Some believed the couple had crashed and sunk deep into the lake's muddy bottom. Others suspected foul play, noting that both phones going silent simultaneously seemed too coincidental. A few, though their numbers dwindled over time, clung to the idea that they had fled willingly, escaping some unseen pressure. But for most, the feeling was one of sympathy and a shared sense of a wound that had never properly healed. The media moved on to fresher stories, but whenever another missing person case emerged in Tennessee, reporters would reference the Reynolds case as a benchmark of the unsolved. True crime shows occasionally featured segments on it, pairing helicopter footage of the lake with James's gentle smile and Sarah's warm eyes. Each time, the Reynolds family was pulled back into their unhealed grief. Liam and Noah, as teenagers, faced whispers from peers or the weight of curious, pitying stares. Over those years, the case file was reopened only a handful of times, usually when a new report of a submerged object in the lake came in. Most were false alarms, sunken logs, or discarded appliances. Rookie detectives would sometimes study the file as a training exercise in complex missing persons investigations, only to close it again with a frustrated sigh. The name Reynolds became a symbol of a frustrating dead end. In the community center, pastors mentioned them in prayers, a reminder of life's fragility. In schools, teachers sometimes used the case to illustrate the importance of community, pointing to the hundreds of volunteers who had searched in the early days. For many in Nashville, the case was proof that even in a vibrant, growing city, the shadow of a mystery could loom large. By the end of 2022, 7 years after the disappearance, a larger-than-usual memorial was held. Many Nashville residents attended, holding candles and flowers, forming a circle around the community center. Liam, now a high school senior, stood before the crowd, his voice trembling but firm. "We will never stop looking. Our parents deserve answers, and we will keep searching for them." His promise echoed into the night, a small flame keeping a decade of hope alive. And just when it seemed the case would remain forever buried in the dust of time, an unexpected event in 2023 reignited the Reynolds file, opening a new and decisive chapter in the long quest for truth. But for nearly 8 years prior, it had remained a cold case, a chilling mystery, an unhealed wound, and a long shadow over the community of Nashville. Following the 2022 memorial, the resolve in Liam Reynolds's voice, "We will never stop looking," seemed to hang in the Nashville air like a command. In March of 2023, nearly 8 years after that fateful night, a private diving and recovery organization named Great Lakes Search and Recovery, GLSR, unexpectedly reached out to the Reynolds family and the Davidson County Sheriff's Office. GLSR was a non-profit group composed of former military personnel, professional salvage divers, and sonar technicians dedicated to locating missing vehicles and victims in bodies of water across the eastern United States. Having successfully solved cold cases in Kentucky and Georgia using cutting-edge technology and methodical approaches, they now offered to bring their expertise to Tennessee. The founder of GLSR, a rugged former Coast Guard officer named Mike Vance with a graying beard and a calm, authoritative demeanor, had a motto he often repeated: "The water keeps its secrets, but it doesn't lie." His partner was a young but exceptionally skilled sonar specialist named Chloe Rossi, who had previously operated sophisticated scanning equipment for marine survey companies. Chloe's intense focus was always locked on the sonar screen, as if deciphering a cryptic language from the deep. Together with their team, they arrived in a truck hauling a custom-built aluminum boat outfitted with a powerful outboard motor and two of the most advanced sonar systems available at the time, a Lowrance HDS Live and a Simrad Go series. At their initial meeting at the sheriff's office, Mike and Chloe spread a detailed hydrographic map of Percy Priest Lake across the table. Seated across from them was Sheriff Walter Briggs, now closer to retirement but still in command, his eyes fixed on the familiar contours of the lake map. "We believe the car is still in the lake," Mike stated firmly, pointing to the northern shoreline where the 2015 cell tower data had recorded the final signal. Chloe added, "The sonar technology available to law enforcement back in 2015 had limited resolution. With our equipment, we can distinguish individual components under the silt. If the fusion is down there, it can't hide from us anymore." Sheriff Briggs was silent for a long moment. Over the past 8 years, he had authorized countless searches, spent innumerable hours on futile dives, and the Reynolds case had become a personal, haunting obsession. But the determined look in Mike and Chloe's eyes sparked a faint ember of hope he thought had long been extinguished. "If you can help," he finally said, "I'll officially reopen the case and issue the necessary permits." This approval not only opened the door for GLSR, but also reignited a flicker of hope for the Reynolds family. The news spread quickly. Local TV stations reported, "Private dive team to reinvestigate 2015 Reynolds disappearance." Many Nashville residents gathered at the lake's edge for the official launch of the operation, where GLSR prepared their boat, the sonar screens gleaming in the sunlight. Chloe stood before the small crowd, holding up an image of a car they had located in a Kentucky lake. "If we found it there," she declared, "we can find it here." Mike emphasized the timing. 8 years is a long time, but it's never too late for the truth. What matters is that we don't give up. His words were measured and carried a significant weight. The Reynolds family, seated in the front row, wept quietly upon hearing this. For them, it was the first time in nearly a decade that someone had spoken with such firm commitment to finding the car and the truth it held. GLSR's plan was meticulously detailed. Over a planned 4 weeks, they would scan the entire designated search area in 50-meter transects, moving the boat at a slow 1.5 knots to ensure crystal-clear sonar images. They had divided the lake into a grid on their map, marking each sector as it was scanned. If a suspicious object was detected, they would drop a buoy, use a powerful neodymium magnet to confirm the presence of ferrous metal, and then send divers down. The entire process would be documented on video and reported directly to the sheriff's office to ensure legal transparency. Sheriff Briggs attended the press conference announcing the plan, his first public statement on the Reynolds case in years. Looking directly into the cameras, he said, "We owe it to the Reynolds family to find answers, and that is what we intend to do." His words led the evening news, sparking a renewed wave of public interest. Newspapers that had long since moved on now ran headlines like, "Nashville's most famous cold case reopened." In the community, anticipation was mixed with skepticism. Some were optimistic, believing modern technology would finally provide closure. Others were cautious, fearing another cycle of raised hopes and profound disappointment. Regardless, all eyes in Nashville turned once more to Percy Priest Lake, the silent body of water that had swallowed the Reynolds family 8 years prior. As the announcement concluded, GLSR's spotlights cut beams across the darkening water. The aluminum boat's engine hummed as they performed final checks. The water lapped softly against the hull, a sound like the lake itself whispering. Everyone present understood that from this moment forward, the investigation was no longer a dormant cold case. It had been reignited, and the truth awaited discovery in the deep water below. As GLSR prepared their boat, checked their sonar equipment, and finalized their grid search pattern, a parallel effort was underway back at the Davidson County Sheriff's Office. A sharp, relatively new investigator named Detective Elena Cruz had been tasked with a critical mission: to re-examine the entire original Reynolds case file from scratch. Elena, known for her meticulous attention to detail and her refusal to accept vague conclusions, spent days in the records room, spreading the thick files across a large table, creating a new timeline and annotating every statement. Every detail, no matter how small, was underlined, highlighted, or notated in the margins. During this deep dive, she uncovered inconsistencies and gaps that the 2015 investigators had either overlooked or been unable to contextualize. In the original report, the last convenience store camera footage showed James and Sarah at 10:45 p.m. cell tower data confirmed their phones were active and moving along I-24 at that time, but Sarah's signal dropped abruptly at 11:10 p.m. near the lake's northern shore. Elena placed these two data points side by side, staring at the numbers, a 25-minute gap. This gap wasn't necessarily unusual given the distance from the store to the last signal location, but when she calculated the average driving speed for that stretch of highway, a discrepancy emerged. "They went missing in a window of about 45 minutes, she muttered to herself. She recalculated. Under normal conditions, that drive should have taken 15 to 20 minutes. So, what happened in the remaining time? Did they stop? Were they intercepted? Or did they turn onto an alternate route? Elena pulled out topographic maps from 2015 and compared them to current ones. She noticed that several small, unmarked access roads along the lake's northern edge had been abandoned or gated off after a flood in 2017. Those roads could have been where the fusion turned off, was forced to stop, or was driven into the water. She marked each potential turnoff, focusing on those that led directly to the area where the final cell phone signal was lost. A chilling correlation emerged. This area aligned with where the delivery driver witness had reported seeing a car pulled over with its hood up. The deeper Elena dug, the more the holes in the original investigation became apparent. Many witnesses had been questioned only cursorily, their statements lacking depth. Some conflicting accounts were never fully reconciled. Most critically, she found no evidence that the 2015 sonar search had thoroughly scanned the northern inlets of the lake. The effort had been focused on the deeper waters near the main dam, overlooking the smaller, shallower coves surrounded by woods. "If the car is in one of those narrow inlets," she wrote in her notebook, "it's no wonder they missed it." Elena compiled all her findings into a visual timeline, from the Reynolds leaving their home, their appearance at the convenience store, their drive onto I-24, to their disappearance after the final signal. On a large map, she connected these points with a red marker. The area between the store and the final signal, a sprawling section of the lake's northern perimeter, was shaded in red. This zone unnerved her. It was where GLSR needed to focus. In a coordination meeting with Sheriff Briggs and the GLSR team, Elena presented her findings, projecting the map onto a screen. "We have an unexplained 25 to 45-minute gap," she stated calmly but firmly. "This red zone is the priority. If the fusion is underwater, it's almost certainly here." Mike Vance nodded, a glint of professional respect in his eyes. "We'll grid that area first. Our sonar won't miss a thing." Chloe Rossi added, With the live scanning, we'll see details down to the wheel spokes. Any metal signature, if it's there, we'll find it." The room fell silent for a moment before Sheriff Briggs spoke, his gaze pensive. Over 8 years, he had seen hope flare and die too many times. But this time, the combination of Elena's data-driven approach and GLSR's confident expertise felt different. "Good," he said. "Let's start where we were never certain, where the signals died that night. If the answer is at the bottom of that lake, it's time to bring it up." As the meeting adjourned, Elena lingered, staring at the map. The red zone seemed to pulse like an open wound, festering for 8 years. She knew that a single misstep could mean another decade of silence. But for the first time since taking ownership of the Reynolds file, a fragile sense of conviction stirred within her. That time gap was the key to unlocking Nashville's most enduring mystery. The next morning, as a light mist still clung to the surface of Percy Priest Lake, the Great Lakes Search and Recovery Team was positioned at the northern shore, in the precise area Elena's map had highlighted. Their aluminum boat was launched slowly, its electric trolling motor humming almost silently as it pushed them into the calm water. Mike Vance stood at the bow, scanning the vast expanse, while Chloe Rossi busied herself with the side scan and down scan sonar units, securing the display screens to the boat's console for optimal viewing. Detective Elena Cruz was also on the boat, clutching her notebook and the annotated map, her heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and dread. The boat moved at a painstakingly slow pace, barely 1.5 knots, to ensure the sonar images were perfectly clear. On the screen, the sound waves reflected from the lakebed appeared as patterns of light and dark, ridges of rock, decaying logs, schools of fish. Chloe explained the readout to Elena. "This is natural geology. This is organic debris. Any man-made, metallic object will stand out like a sore thumb." Elena watched intently, the scrolling images like a foreign language she was rapidly learning to decipher. Roughly 90 minutes into the search, as the boat scanned a narrow, wooded cove on the northern shore, Chloe's posture suddenly stiffened. On the screen, an anomalous, rectangular shape appeared, approximately 16 feet long, lying at a slight angle, partially buried in the silt. It had straight edges and distinct, rounded corners. "Mike, take a look at this," Chloe called out, her voice low but charged with excitement. Mike moved to her side, his eyes locking onto the screen. He was silent for several seconds, then gave a slight, grim nod. "That's not a rock formation. That's manufactured. And it's the exact size and profile of a mid-size sedan." A hushed silence fell over the boat. Elena held her breath, her fingers gripping the edge of her notebook. The sonar image was too defined, too geometric to be dismissed. A 16-foot-long, 6-foot-wide object with a distinct roofline, half submerged in the thick mud. It looked as if it had been there for an age. Chloe maneuvered the controls, making several passes over the area, scanning it from different angles. Each pass sharpened the image. The shadowy outlines of 4 wheels became faintly visible beneath the sediment. The frame of the vehicle lay there like a ghost from the depths. "This is it," Elena whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "It's the fusion." But Mike remained the cautious veteran. "Not yet. We need to mark the exact coordinates and get the sheriff's evidence team here to witness everything. Only then is it official and admissible." Chloe logged the GPS coordinates with precision, noting every detail of the sonar signature. They deployed a bright orange buoy, which bobbed on the surface directly above the submerged object. The boat's engine was cut, and they drifted silently in the gentle ripples. Everyone aboard stared at the buoy as if it marked a gateway to a secret buried for 8 years. Sheriff Briggs received the call from Mike Vance around 1 p.m. Mike's voice was hoarse but steady. "We have a significant target. High confidence it's a vehicle. Coordinates logged. You need to get down here now. Within 30 minutes, Sheriff's Department vehicles converged on the shoreline. Officers in uniform emerged with cameras, evidence kits, and logbooks. Sheriff Briggs led the way, his eyes, older now but still sharp, burning with a renewed intensity. Seeing the orange buoy, he paused for a moment, then said under his breath, "Maybe. After all these years." Chloe replayed the sonar footage for the assembled law enforcement officials. The group huddled around the screen murmured in awe. "That's a chassis. Look, you can even make out the wheel wells," one deputy said, his voice shaky. Another asked, "Could it just be an old junker that was dumped?" Mike fielded the question instantly. "It's possible, but the probability of a vehicle matching the size and model of the missing car being located precisely where the victim's phones went dead 8 years ago is statistically negligible. This requires verification." Sheriff Briggs nodded and ordered the area immediately secured. Yellow crime scene tape was strung along the shoreline, keeping a growing crowd of onlookers and media at a distance. A heavy-duty recovery winch truck was called in, and police divers suited up. Elena stood by, a chill running down her spine. She understood the gravity of this moment. After nearly a decade, they had potential physical evidence, no longer just theories and whispers. The GLSR boat anchored near the buoy, with Chloe continuously running the sonar to guide the divers to the exact spot. On the screen, the object lay as if in a deep sleep, shrouded in mud and aquatic growth. Mike checked the divers' lines, ensuring all safety protocols were followed. "We have to be methodical," he said, his voice low. "Any mistake could compromise potential evidence inside." Sheriff Briggs gazed out at the lake, his hands clasped behind his back. His mind echoed with years of the case's silence, the helpless press conferences, the despair of the Reynolds family. Now, beneath that placid water, the answer they had waited 8 years for might finally lie. "All right," he said, his voice cutting through the tense air. "Begin the recovery operation. I want everything filmed and documented. We are going to find out the truth." And so, Percy Priest Lake, silent for so long, was transformed into an active crime scene. From that single orange buoy, small ripples spread outwards, signaling the return of a long-dormant secret. All attention was focused on that spot, where a 16-foot metallic shape, a sedan, waited to be raised, promising to reveal the truth that had cast a shadow over Nashville for 8 years. That afternoon, after the area around the orange buoy was fully secured and forensic documentation began, Mike Vance and Chloe Rossi donned their dry suits, oxygen tanks, and full-face masks. The metallic clicks of their gear and the soft lap of waves against the boat created an atmosphere of suffocating tension. Before submerging, Mike gripped Sheriff Briggs's hand and looked him squarely in the eye. "If this is the car," he said, "then today changes everything." Briggs gave a solemn nod, his own eyes red-rimmed with suppressed emotion. Mike entered the water first, his form disappearing beneath the surface with barely a ripple. Chloe followed, tethered to the boat by a safety line. The daylight vanished within just a few feet of descent. The lake water, thick with suspended silt and algae, reduced visibility to near zero. In their masks, they saw only a dense, brownish-green haze, occasionally pierced by the narrow beams of their powerful waterproof lights. They followed the guided descent line down towards the sonar-targeted spot. It was like swimming through a blind tunnel, relying on touch and spatial memory. Chloe's heart hammered in her chest, the steady rhythm of her regulator breaths loud in her ears. Suddenly, Mike's gloved hand made contact with something solid. He signaled for Chloe to halt, then ran his hand along the surface. Smooth curves, rounded edges. The thick layer of silt could not disguise the familiar feel of automotive metal. "We've made contact," he thought. His fingers scrabbled at the mud, searching for a defining feature. They found an oval protrusion. He scraped away the accumulated grime, and the beam of his light revealed faint lettering beneath the algae, the Ford oval logo. They exchanged a look through their masks, a moment of silent, grim confirmation. Chloe gave a thumbs up, signaling that the car had been found, but they didn't stop there. Mike worked his way lower, towards the rear of the vehicle. After several minutes of carefully clearing mud, his fingers traced over smooth, raised numbers. He scraped more mud away, and the flashlight beam illuminated a clear sequence, TN7BJ42. The alphanumeric code cut through 8 years of silence like a knife. It matched the license plate number in the 2015 police file. This was the charcoal grey Ford Fusion belonging to James and Sarah Reynolds. Chloe immediately began filming with an underwater camera, capturing the Ford logo and the license plate in high definition. Those few seconds of footage became the first piece of undeniable, tangible evidence. Mike secured a small, bright yellow marker buoy to the car's frame for easy identification, and then attached a heavy-duty recovery strap to the vehicle's solid rear axle. Every movement was slow, deliberate, and respectful, as if handling a coffin rather than a lifeless machine. On the surface, the crowd watched the safety lines and the stream of bubbles rising. When Mike gave 3 sharp tugs on the line, the prearranged success signal, Sheriff Briggs nearly choked up. He whispered, almost to himself, "We found them." Elena, standing nearby with her hands over her mouth, could no longer hold back. From her tears. The long, agonizing wait was finally over. Underwater, Mike and Chloe spent additional minutes conducting a preliminary visual inspection. The car's doors were closed, and the vehicle was tilted at a roughly 35-degree angle, its front end buried deeper in the mud. Long strands of aquatic weeds draped over the hood like mournful arms guarding an 8-year-old secret. Shining their lights through the silt-streaked windows, they could make out the faint, ghastly outlines of the front seats. Mike felt a lump form in his throat, knowing the fate of James and Sarah likely lay just behind that glass. After over 20 minutes, they surfaced, removing their masks and gulping in the fresh air. A wave of emotion erupted from the shore where locals had gathered, many clapping and weeping openly. "It's them," Chloe stated first, her voice clear and carrying over the water. 2011 Fusion. Plate matches the file. Mike added, his voice heavier. "No doubt. We've found the Reynolds car." Sheriff Briggs approached the water's edge, gripping their shoulders as they climbed onto the dock. "You've done what we couldn't in 8 years. From this moment, everything changes." He then signaled the recovery team to mobilize their equipment. A large flatbed truck with a heavy-duty winch had arrived. Thick steel cables were fed into the water, ready to pull the car from its muddy grave. Elena stood transfixed, watching the orange buoy bob, her mind echoing with a single powerful thought. The truth is rising. In the official investigation log, that moment marked the definitive turning point from a hopeless cold case. The Reynolds file now had its first piece of solid physical evidence. The Fusion, and whatever secrets it held within, would finally open the door to the answers Nashville had been waiting 8 years to hear. The winch motor roared to life, shattering the lake's unnatural quiet. All eyes were fixed on the steel cable as it grew taut and began to slowly, inexorably, lift its burden from the depths, guided by the diver's directions. On a support boat, the recovery team adjusted the cable's angle, ensuring the loop was secure around the vehicle's frame. A hand signal was given, and the winch began its steady pull, churning the water into a cloudy, brown plume below. The water seemed to shudder, and large bubbles of trapped air escaped as the mud-caked, charcoal-grey roof of a sedan broke the surface. A collective gasp, mixed with sobs, rose from the crowd behind the police tape. The Reynolds family's 2011 Fusion, missing for 8 years, had finally returned to the light. As the car was lifted higher, murky water poured from broken window seals, carrying with it algae, silt, and a pungent, decay-laden odor. Police quickly erected large privacy screens around the recovery area on the dock to shield the site from outsiders and the media. Forensic officers in white hazmat suits stood ready, gloves on, with evidence bags and sample containers laid out on folding tables. Sheriff Briggs signaled for reporters and onlookers to maintain their distance, his voice firm over a bullhorn. This is now an active crime scene. No one enters this area except the designated forensic team. As the car was carefully lowered onto the flatbed, the forensic lead used specialized tools to pry open the driver's side door. A heavy silence fell over the secured area. Inside, the dim light revealed two skeletal remains in the front seats. The seatbelts were still fastened tightly across the pelvic bones, a silent testament that they had never left the car in their final moments. The seats were rotted, and fragments of clothing were embedded in the muck. On the bony finger of the passenger side remains, a tarnished silver wedding band still gleamed faintly. Elena stood back, clutching her notebook, struggling to maintain her professional composure. She knew with a painful certainty that these were James and Sarah, and that the horrifying truth was now confirmed. They never had a chance to survive and return home to their boys. The forensic team began their meticulous work, filming every inch of the car's interior. A waterlogged, ancient-looking smartphone was found lodged under the passenger seat, its case cracked. A decayed leather wallet was discovered near the gas pedal, empty of cash but containing a corroded driver's license and credit card fragments. Dark, dried stains on the dashboard were noted for later analysis. Everything was carefully collected, tagged, and sealed in sterile evidence bags. Every step was recorded by handheld and body-worn cameras to ensure an indisputable chain of evidence. Sheriff Briggs watched from outside the screen, his face a mask of grim resolve. 8 years of waiting had ended not with a miracle, but with this somber scene. He turned his gaze towards the Reynolds family, standing dozens of yards away under the protection of a family liaison officer. The aunt held her nephews tightly, all three of them weeping, their cries a quiet counterpoint to the mechanical sounds of the recovery. He knew no words could comfort them now, only the promise that from this day forward, this was no longer a missing persons case, but a homicide investigation that would be pursued to the very end. Once fully secured on the flatbed, the Fusion, dripping mud and lake water, was covered with a heavy protective tarp and prepared for transport to the State Crime Lab's secure vehicle bay. A police escort fell in behind the truck, its lights flashing silently, a somber procession signaling that a long-buried secret was finally being brought into the light. Before the vehicle left, Mike Vance approached Elena, his voice low and earnest. "We did our part, but this is just the beginning of the next phase." Elena nodded, her eyes burning with determination. At the scene, a small forensics team remained to continue a fingertip search of the recovery area. Divers went back into the water to ensure no small pieces of evidence had been missed. A few scattered fragments of plastic and metal were recovered, possibly parts broken off during the initial impact or from the car being maneuvered into the lake. Every fragment was bagged and logged. No one said it aloud, but the shared thought was palpable. James and Sarah Reynolds did not die in a simple accident. Someone had put them here. On the evening news, every local channel led with the breakthrough. Reynolds' family car found in Percy Priest Lake after 8 years. Helicopter footage showed the mud-covered car being pulled from the water, zooming in on the figures in white hazmat suits. Nashville was gripped anew by the case, and the police tip lines were flooded with calls from people hoping to provide or uncover new clues. For the investigators, the path forward was now clear. This was to be treated as a homicide. The two skeletons left no room for doubt. That night, back in his office, Sheriff Briggs sat alone, staring at the Reynolds case file, once labeled cold. He took a red pen, drew a firm line through that word, and wrote in bold, capital letters, "Homicide." Outside the window, the night wind swept across the now silent lake, as if nothing had happened. But that silence no longer held its secret. A new chapter had begun, and Nashville would soon be forced to confront the truth. The disappearance 8 years ago was a meticulously concealed crime, and the pursuit of justice was only just beginning. The mud-caked fusion was transported directly to the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation's, TBI, forensic garage that night, while the 2 sets of skeletal remains were sent to the state medical examiner's office for official examination. The next morning, the ME's lab was brightly lit and sterile. Gleaming stainless steel tables were prepared, and dissection tools were neatly arranged. The chief forensic anthropologist, Dr. Eris Thorne, a man with over 25 years of experience, was leading the examination. He understood the immense weight of community expectation resting on this analysis. It would not only confirm the victims' identities, but also shape the entire direction of the homicide investigation. The 2 skeletons were laid side by side on separate tables. Years underwater had decomposed almost all soft tissue, but the bone structure and a few personal artifacts remained. Next to the driver's remains was a rusted wristwatch, its metal band still encircling the wrist bones. Faint, but still legible, engraving on the back read, "To James, always yours, S." On the passenger side remains, the tarnished silver wedding band remained on a bony finger. These 2 details alone provided overwhelming confirmation to the family and police, but legal protocol demanded DNA verification. Bone marrow samples were taken and rushed to the lab. The results came back quickly, matching DNA samples provided by Liam and Noah, officially confirming these were the remains of James and Sarah Reynolds. After identification, the forensic team conducted a detailed pathological examination. Clear perimortem fractures were noted on James's skull, a long, linear crack running from the right temple to the occipital bone, with sharp, clean edges indicative of a tremendous blow from a blunt object. Sarah had similar injuries. Her skull showed a depressed fracture on the left frontal bone, with spiderweb cracking radiating outward. Neither injury pattern was consistent with the forces of a car sinking into a lake. The fracture angles and severity suggested they occurred before death, with significant force. Examining the rib cages, forensic experts found multiple broken ribs on both victims. James had 3 broken ribs on his right side. Sarah had 2 broken on the left and 3 on the right. The fractures showed signs of healing, but the pattern suggested they occurred at or near the time of death, likely from a heavy impact, such as being struck or from a struggle, not from water pressure. Dr. Thorne concluded the examination with a firm, definitive statement. This was not a traffic accident. This was a homicide, staged to look like one. His words hung in the sterile air of the lab. After 8 years, the truth was laid bare. James and Sarah had been attacked, likely just before their car was pushed into the reservoir to erase evidence. This conclusion was immediately relayed to the sheriff's office. Reading the report, Sheriff Briggs felt a cold fury settle over him. The years of self-blame for not finding the car now twisted into a focused resolve. They didn't just vanish. They were murdered. He called an urgent meeting with his entire investigative team, placing the nearly 80-page forensic report on the table. As of today, he said, his voice low and steady, the Reynolds case is no longer a cold case. It is officially a double homicide investigation. News from the medical examiner's office leaked almost instantly, igniting a media firestorm. Headlines screamed, "Reynolds' deaths ruled homicide." Nashville was stunned. A decade of quiet unease erupted into outright outrage. If they were murdered, then someone's been walking free among us for 8 years, became a common refrain. Church prayer vigils swelled in size, but the mood had shifted from sorrow to a demand for justice. For the Reynolds family, the forensic report was a double-edged sword. It ended the torturous ambiguity but deepened the pain. Liam and Noah, now young men, received the news from police and wept. They had harbored a faint hope that their parents had died instantly in an accident, without suffering. The truth, that they had been brutally attacked, was a devastating blow. "At least we know," Liam was heard to whisper, holding his brother. But the words offered little solace against the grim reality. For the police, the forensic report was the pivotal turning point. It forced the entire investigation to be re-evaluated from the ground up. Every detail from August 5, 2015, needed to be re-examined through the new lens of murder. Detective Elena Cruz, who had discovered the critical time gap, quietly noted in her file, "A murder staged as an accident." The killer used the lake as a grave. She knew every investigative step from now on had a new, singular purpose, not to find missing persons, but to hunt a murderer. As the forensic conclusions were announced, the crime scene team continued their detailed work on the Ford Fusion in the TBI garage. The grey car, now cleaned of exterior mud but still bearing the scars of its long submersion, sat in a sealed, climate-controlled bay, every corner monitored by cameras. On the concrete floor, white tarps were spread, and investigators in full biohazard suits began the painstaking process of dismantling the interior. It was during this process that the first critical clues, hidden for 8 years, began to emerge. In the back seat, buried under a layer of fine silt and decayed leaf matter, they found an older model Samsung phone. It was ruined, its plastic casing warped and battery dislodged, but the SIM card slot was intact. Elena noted it immediately, knowing that even a damaged SIM could potentially yield recovered data, contacts, or the ghost of a final message. Sealing the phone in an evidence bag, she thought this small device might reveal what 8 years of searching could not. Near the brake pedal, the forensic team found a man's leather wallet. The leather was rotted and brittle, empty of cash, but it contained decayed paper scraps and the corroded remnants of a bank card. According to the family, James always carried a wallet with at least $100 for emergencies. Its emptiness suggested not just robbery, but that the killer may have taken valuables after the crime. Scanning the interior with alternative light sources revealed another crucial find, a small, smeared bloodstain on the lower dashboard, near the driver's side knee panel. The sample was quickly collected and sent for DNA analysis. Days later, the results came back. It did not match the DNA of James or Sarah Reynolds. It was a foreign profile, possibly that of the killer, or another person who had been in the car. For the police, this was potential gold, a distinct DNA sequence, unidentified, but possibly the key to the entire case. Concurrently, the crime scene team found a strange, partial shoe impression preserved in the dried mud on the driver's side floor mat. It was larger than James's known shoe size, and its tread pattern, a distinct diamond-shaped lug, did not match any of the shoes recovered from the Reynolds home. The impression was clear enough, thanks to the embedded mud, to identify it as likely coming from a work boot or heavy-duty athletic shoe. Elena examined the photo of the print, a chill running down her spine. "This isn't from the owner," she stated. Someone else was in the driver's seat, operating the car in its final moments. These findings were quickly compiled into a new report. In an internal strategy meeting, with photos of the evidence laid out, the tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Sheriff Briggs pointed to the photo of the shoe print. If these are the killer's boots, he was right there, in that very driver's seat, with them. Elena added, the foreign blood could be his. The Samsung might tell us who they were in contact with last. The Samsung phone was sent to the state's digital forensics lab for data extraction. Technicians used advanced methods to try and recover any data from the waterlogged SIM card and internal memory. A single final message or an unusual call log entry could open a completely new investigative avenue. While awaiting those results, the shoe print was compared to databases of shoe treads from 2015. Preliminary findings suggested the diamond lug pattern was consistent with certain models of Timberland work boots, size 11.5. It wasn't enough to identify a specific person, but it began to sketch a profile, a tall, solidly built individual present at the crime scene. One late evening, as Elena pored over the crime scene photos, she connected the dots. Empty wallet, foreign blood, a larger man's shoe print. She wrote in her journal, "Not an accident. Someone was in the car. Someone else drove. Someone tried to erase all traces but left their own behind." With these new clues, the cold case was now white-hot. Media focus shifted from a tragic disappearance to a whodunit. Reynolds' case, evidence points to murder. Nashville was abuzz. Tip lines were flooded. Someone recalled a suspicious man lurking near the lake access road back in 2015. Another reported seeing a dark-colored SUV parked oddly near the I-24 off-ramp that night. The sheriff's department email inbox overflowed with potential leads, keeping a team of investigators working around the clock to vet them. Sheriff Briggs, though wearier than ever, had a new fire in his eyes. Looking at the evidence board, he whispered to himself, 8 years passed, but the killer left us a trail. Now he can't hide. The fusion had carried within it not only the remains of James and Sarah Reynolds, but also critical pieces of the puzzle. A damaged phone, an empty wallet, foreign blood, and a shoe print that didn't belong to them. All of it pointed to one inescapable conclusion. A third person had been in the car that night. That person was the killer who had staged an accident, burying his crime beneath the waters of Percy Priest Lake for 8 years. Following the physical evidence recovered from the fusion, the old Samsung phone, the empty wallet, the foreign blood, and the man's shoe print, investigators knew they had to return to the very beginning, the witnesses interviewed 8 years earlier. Many statements from 2015 had been taken at face value or recorded in vague summaries due to the lack of evidence pointing to a crime. Now, with the case officially a homicide, every detail, no matter how small, needed to be re-examined with a fresh, critical perspective. Sheriff Briggs gathered the team. "We're starting over with the witnesses. From scratch." He pointed to a whiteboard where he'd written the names of everyone questioned in 2015. The first witness was the night clerk at the convenience store where the security camera had captured James and Sarah's final images at 10:45 p.m. Her name was Brenda Shelton, now in her late 50s, her face etched with the fatigue of a lifetime of night shifts. When Detective Cruz and a colleague met with her again, Brenda was initially nervous but quickly became assertive. "That night," she said firmly, "I didn't just see them buy a soda. I remember James walked out first, but he came back in a minute later, and he was arguing with a guy just outside the door." Elena's pen froze above her notebook. This detail was not in the original 2012 report. "Can you describe the man?" she asked, keeping her voice calm. Brenda closed her eyes, trying to visualize. He was tall, well over 6 feet. Looked about 40, maybe. Had dark hair, kind of long, pulled back. Was wearing a dark jacket, maybe navy blue. I remember because he slammed his hand on the door frame, looked really angry. James kept his voice down but seemed real tense. Sarah was behind him, looking scared. Asked why she hadn't mentioned this before. Brenda sighed. The officers back then just asked what they bought and when they left. I said something about a guy outside, but they didn't seem interested. Wrote it down as loiterer. I figured it wasn't important, so I dropped it. Elena recorded everything meticulously, having Brenda sign a new, formal statement. The picture of August 5th was becoming clearer. James and Sarah weren't alone. They had a confrontation with a man just minutes before they vanished. The second witness was the delivery driver, Harold Benson, now retired and living in a small town outside Chattanooga. When investigators tracked him down, he was quiet for a long moment, then said, "I've waited 8 years for someone to ask me again. I knew what I saw. Nobody wanted to hear it back then." Harold recounted that night, driving his delivery route south on I-24. "What caught my eye wasn't just the car on the shoulder with its hood up," he said, his voice lowering. "There was a dark-colored SUV, maybe a Ford Explorer or something like that, parked a few car lengths behind it, its lights off. I saw a man standing near the driver's side of the Fusion. Tall, broad-shouldered, seemed like he was talking to someone inside. Elena pressed him. Can you describe the man?" Harold nodded. "Big guy. Dark hair. Dark jacket. I only saw him for a second as I passed, but that image, it stuck with me." Both Elena and Sheriff Briggs felt a chill at the coincidence between Brenda and Harold's accounts. Two independent witnesses, at different locations, described a man with a similar build, dark hair, and a dark jacket. Cross-referencing this new description with old case data, a name surfaced: Marcus Boone. Marcus Boone was an old acquaintance of James Reynolds from college. They had occasionally done minor freelance IT work together years prior, but according to the family, their relationship had soured over a failed business deal. Boone was known to have a quick temper and had had several run-ins with law enforcement for minor offenses. James's brother recalled James saying, "I want nothing more to do with Marcus. He's bad news." When Elena showed a recent photo of Marcus Boone to Brenda and Harold separately, both had strong reactions. Brenda confirmed, "Yes, that looks very much like the man I saw." Harold was even more certain. "That's him. I'd bet on it." The witness testimony now dovetailed with the findings in the car: the large shoe print, the blood not belonging to the victims, the empty wallet. It began to form the silhouette of a tall, powerful man, possibly injured during a struggle, with a potential financial motive. Marcus Boone, with his history of a soured relationship and financial disputes with James, emerged as the prime suspect. In an urgent meeting at the sheriff's office, Sheriff Briggs stood before the investigative team, his expression stern. "We have witnesses. We have physical traces. This is no longer a theory. We focus everything on Boone." Elena added, "But we need more. We need to match the blood in the car to his DNA. We need to place him at the lake that night." The investigation had officially entered its final, most critical phase. After 8 years, the name Marcus Boone, once buried in an old interview log, was now at the center of the whiteboard, sending a renewed wave of intensity through the department. In Nashville, a community that had prayed for answers for nearly a decade began to whisper a new, chilling realization: the killer might have been living among them all along. With Marcus Boone identified by 2 separate witnesses, the investigative team shifted its full focus onto him. A deep dive into Boone's profile revealed he owned a small, struggling computer repair shop in Murfreesboro, about a 30-minute drive southeast of Nashville. The business was barely solvent, often criticized for shoddy work, and had been repeatedly cited by county inspectors for code violations. Financial records pulled with a warrant showed Boone was drowning in debt, overdue business loans, maxed-out credit cards, and personal debts to acquaintances. His total debt was in the tens of thousands of dollars, creating significant financial pressure. DMV records confirmed Boone owned a dark blue 2012 Ford Explorer, registered in his name. This matched the vehicle Harold Benson reported seeing near the Fusion on the Lake Access Road the night of the disappearance. Reporters digging through old social media photos found several images of Boone beside this specific SUV. The vehicle had been sold in 2018, but the registration history remained, linking him directly to the witness's account. Police began reconstructing Boone's timeline for August 5, 2015. Work invoices from his shop showed he closed around 6 p.m. that day. Friends reported he was at a local sports bar by 7:30 p.m., had several beers, and left around 9:30 p.m. After that, no one could account for his whereabouts. When questioned by police back in 2015, Boone had claimed he went straight home to his apartment and fell asleep, an alibi that could not be verified. No receipts, no security camera footage from his building, no witnesses. In other words, from approximately 9:30 p.m. to the early hours of August 6th, Marcus Boone had no verifiable alibi. Detective Cruz noted meticulously, "The window from 9:30 p.m. to midnight on August 5th is the critical gap. This is the exact time frame when James and Sarah vanished." Boone had means, motive, a history of conflict with James, and now no alibi. A review of Boone's finances after the disappearance revealed a massive red flag. 3 days after the Reynolds were reported missing, Boone made a cash deposit of $12,000 into his nearly empty business account, a sum that far exceeded his typical monthly income. When questioned about it informally in 2015, he had vaguely claimed it was a repayment from a client for an old job, but could provide no invoice, no name, and no paper trail. This aligned perfectly with the robbery theory. James's empty wallet paired with Boone's sudden influx of cash made him appear exponentially more suspicious. A deeper probe uncovered evidence placing Boone near the reservoir. A traffic camera on a feeder road near the I-24 exit for Percy Priest Lake had captured a grainy image of a dark blue SUV matching Boone's explorer's description, time-stamped at 10:52 p.m. on August 5th. This was a critical piece of the puzzle, placing his vehicle in the area at the exact time the victims' phones went dead. As Elena and Sheriff Briggs sat in the briefing room, pinning this new evidence to the board, witness statements, the dark SUV, the debts, the suspicious cash deposit, the traffic cam image, the picture became terrifyingly clear. Boone not only matched the description from 2 independent witnesses, but he also had motive, means, opportunity, and was placed near the scene by a traffic camera. Internally, many on the team felt they had enough for an arrest warrant, but Briggs was cautious. "We need something direct, something that ties Boone to the inside of that fusion. The blood. A fingerprint. Something that makes it undeniable." Elena nodded, her eyes sharp. "The foreign blood in the car is the key. If it matches Boone, this ends here." The investigation escalated rapidly. Focusing on Marcus Boone was no longer a working theory. It was the operational directive. All efforts were now laser-focused on him, James's old associate, now the prime suspect in Middle Tennessee's most shocking double homicide. The waterlogged Samsung phone found in the fusion, initially seeming like a useless relic, became a pivotal clue. Its memory chip and SIM card were sent to a specialized digital forensics lab, where experts used advanced data recovery techniques to attempt to read any residual information. 4 days, computers ran complex algorithms, and finally, a fragment of data was recovered. It was a log of a final outgoing call, time-stamped 11:05 p.m. on August 5, 2015. Dialed number, a number registered to Marcus Boone. The call duration was listed as 22 seconds. Those few lines of data sent a shockwave through the investigation team. Elena Cruz read the report aloud, her voice tight. James or Sarah called Marcus Boone minutes before they died. It was the most direct evidence yet that the victims and their prime suspect were in contact at the time of the crime. Elena immediately requested a review of all cellular data for Boone's number from that night. With a warrant, the telecom provider provided the records. The result: Boone's phone had pinged a cell tower less than a mile from the northern shore of Percy Priest Lake at 11:06 p.m. This meant that as the call was made from the fusion to his phone, he was in the immediate vicinity. The digital evidence now perfectly dovetailed with the physical evidence and the witness statements. The call log, the cell tower ping, the traffic camera image, it all tied together like a noose tightening. In a tense strategy meeting, investigators debated their next move. We have the witnesses, the shoe print, the financial motive, the traffic cam, and now a phone call placing him at the scene. It's enough, argued one detective. Another urged caution. We still need the DNA confirmation. If the blood in the car is Boone's, it's game over. Sheriff Briggs made the decision. Right. But even without it, the picture is undeniable. He was there, he was called by them, and he has no alibi. We bring him in for questioning. Now. News of the phone records did not leak, but the renewed focus on Boone was noticed. In Nashville, the whispers grew louder. Marcus Boone's name started appearing in hushed conversations in diners and online forums. Those who knew him contacted police, recounting his past, his temper, his financial troubles. The community, silent for so long, was now mobilized, waiting for justice to be served. Elena stood late in the evidence garage, looking at the fusion. She touched the dashboard where the foreign blood had been found. He was here, she thought, in their final moments. In her mind, she reconstructed the scene. The Reynolds, possibly pulled over, a confrontation erupting. Boone is injured, his blood smearing on the dashboard. He then forces the car into the lake to cover his tracks. But that tiny bloodstain had betrayed him, waiting 8 years to become an undeniable accusation. Outside, the city buzzed with an anxious energy. In his office, Sheriff Briggs and Elena reviewed the strategy. Tomorrow, Briggs said firmly, we bring him into the interrogation room. This time, he doesn't leave without giving us answers. The plan to confront Marcus Boone was set in motion, with the digital evidence serving as a powerful, if not yet conclusive, weapon. A phone call made from the depths of despair 8 years ago was now echoing loudly in the present, leading them directly to the prime suspect. On June 14, 2023, with the accumulated weight of circumstantial evidence, the witness statements, the traffic camera image, the financial records, and the phone records, police summoned Marcus Boone for formal questioning at the Davidson County Sheriff's Office. The interrogation room was stark, lit by a harsh fluorescent light that glinted off the scratched metal table. 2 cameras on the wall blinked their red recording lights. Boone entered with a swagger that seemed slightly forced, wearing a faded band t-shirt and jeans, his eyes scanning the room with a practiced defiance. He sat down, crossed his arms, and said, I already told you people everything I know 8 years ago. Let's get this over with. Detective Cruz, along with a seasoned colleague, began the questioning. The first volley was deliberate. Mr. Boone, can you again account for your whereabouts between 9:30 p.m. and midnight on August 5, 2015? Boone didn't hesitate. Home. Watched a movie. Fell asleep on the couch. Like I said. Elena pressed. Can anyone verify that? A neighbor. A phone call. Boone shrugged. I lived alone. Didn't have a girlfriend then. Nobody to verify. But that's what happened. His answer was a verbatim repeat of his 2015 statement. Elena kept her voice level. Are you certain you didn't leave your apartment? Because we have a traffic camera image of your Ford Explorer on the road to Percy Priest Lake at 10:52 p.m. that night. Boone gave a short, derisive laugh. There are a million dark SUVs in Tennessee. You're chasing ghosts. Elena shifted tactics, mentioning the Reynolds. You were acquainted with James and Sarah Reynolds, correct? Boone paused for a half-second too long. Yeah, from way back. We hadn't spoken in years. James owed me money from a project that went south. Then he ghosted me. I had nothing to do with whatever happened to them. His words created a brief silence. Previously, Boone had denied any ongoing issues with James. Now, He was admitting to a financial dispute and a motive, contradicting his old statement. The second detective pounced on it. "You say you know nothing, but you just described James owing you money and cutting contact. How would you know he ghosted you if you hadn't tried to contact him before he disappeared?" Boone flinched, licked his lips, and shifted in his chair. "I heard through the grapevine. You know how it is." But the hitch in his voice was noticeable. The turning point came when Elena, while discussing the Fusion's recovery, casually mentioned the car's condition. Boone, trying to appear dismissive, let slip, "Yeah, well, it's not like you found it with the windows down." Both detectives exchanged a quick glance. The condition of the windows had never been released to the public. It was a detail known only to the investigative team and the recovery divers. His comment indicated knowledge of the crime scene that an innocent person could not possess. Elena leaned forward slightly, her voice calm but piercing. "What did you just say about the windows?" Boone blinked, realizing his mistake. He stammered for a second, then recovered with a forced sneer. "Nothing. Just saying. A car underwater for years. Windows usually break, right? It was a guess." But his recovery was weak, and the damage was done. The interrogation lasted for 2 hours. On paper, Boone wasn't arrested. He was still just a person of interest. But to the investigation team, he was now the prime suspect. The internal report stated, "Boone denies being at the reservoir, but traffic cam, witness testimony, and his own admission of motive contradict him." He revealed non-public knowledge of the crime scene. Assessment: high probability of involvement. As Boone left the station, his walk was less confident than when he had entered. Elena watched him go, a cold certainty settling in her gut. She was sure this man had driven his dark SUV to that lakeside road 8 years ago. The only question remaining was what would finally break the case open: the DNA. The foreign blood sample found on the Fusion's dashboard, discovered shortly after the car's recovery, had always been the potential linchpin. Though minuscule, it was the piece of evidence that could move from circumstantial to conclusive for Detective Cruz and the forensic team. The sample had been sent to the TBI's DNA analysis unit, one of the most advanced in the country. Technicians worked tirelessly, extracting the DNA and comparing it against the federal CODIS database and, now, against a reference sample obtained covertly from Marcus Boone, from a discarded coffee cup. When the results came back, the Davidson County Sheriff's Office erupted in a wave of subdued triumph. The report was concise and definitive. A single line made the 8-year investigation worth every second. DNA from the blood smear on the vehicle's dashboard matches Marcus Boone's DNA with a probability of 1 in 1.2 billion. Elena read the result aloud to the assembled team, her hands steady but her voice thick with emotion. Sheriff Briggs sank into his chair, exhaling a breath he felt like he'd been holding for nearly a decade. "It's done," he said quietly. "We have him." This was the first piece of direct, irrefutable evidence placing Marcus Boone inside the Ford Fusion where James and Sarah Reynolds were killed. It was no longer about witness accounts, grainy traffic cameras, or phone records. Marcus Boone's blood was in that car. It proved he was inside it or directly interacting with it at the time of the crime. On the caseboard, Elena wrote 3 words in bold, red letters: motive, opportunity, DNA. She laid it out for the team. Boone had a financial motive. He had the opportunity, no alibi. He had the means. His vehicle was at the scene. And now his DNA is inside the victim's car. He's not just a suspect. He is the killer. Sheriff Briggs, however, remained strategically cautious. "We move fast, but we move by the book. We get an arrest warrant. We make sure this case is airtight for the DA." The plan was set. First, secure an arrest warrant for Marcus Boone based on the DNA evidence and the totality of the case. Second, coordinate a tactical arrest to ensure safety and prevent flight. Third, prepare for a full interrogation with the DNA evidence as the centerpiece. Elena was tasked with compiling the entire case file for the district attorney. She included copies of the DNA report, photos of the blood evidence, the shoe print analysis, the phone records, and the witness statements. Each document was arranged to tell the story of the crime chronologically, so when presented to Boone, it would be an undeniable narrative of his guilt. Meanwhile, surveillance on Boone indicated he was getting nervous. He was seen cleaning out his shop, making calls to a friend in Kentucky about lying low for a while, and was reportedly drinking heavily. This behavior only reinforced the team's conviction that Boone knew the net was closing. In a final briefing, Briggs looked at each member of his team. "We're about to close an 8-year-old wound for this city and for that family. I want it done right. When we bring him in this time, he's not leaving." Elena nodded, remembering Boone's arrogant smirk during the first interrogation. This time, she thought, he won't be smirking. Prior to the arrest, Elena stood one last time in the evidence garage, looking at the silent, hulking form of the fusion. She placed a hand on the door frame. He was here, in their final moments. She pictured that August night, the confrontation, the violence, Boone's blood leaving its accidental, damning signature on the dashboard. A signature that had waited 8 years to be read. Outside, Nashville waited. Though the DNA results were not public, the tension was palpable. Marcus Boone's name was on everyone's lips. The community, which had held vigils and prayed for answers, was now poised on the brink of justice. In a quiet office, Elena and Sheriff Briggs reviewed the arrest warrant. "It's time," Briggs said, his voice firm with 8 years of resolve. "We end this." The plan to arrest Marcus Boone, backed by the irrefutable proof of his own DNA, was initiated. A small, dried bloodstain from a rainy night in 2015 now served as the definitive warrant for his arrest, bringing the long hunt to its final, decisive stage. On the morning of June 28, 2023, with the arrest warrant signed by a judge based on the DNA evidence and the compiled case file, a tactical team from the Davidson County Sheriff's Office moved in. Marcus Boone was at his modest rented house in Murfreesboro, loading boxes into the back of his current vehicle, a pickup truck. He looked up, startled, as multiple unmarked cars and sheriff's cruisers silently blocked both ends of his street. Officers in tactical vests emerged, weapons not drawn but visibly at the ready. "Marcus Boone," a detective called out. "We have a warrant for your arrest for the murders of James and Sarah Reynolds. Put your hands where we can see them." Boone froze for a moment, his face a mask of shock that quickly twisted into resignation. He offered no resistance as he was subdued, placed in handcuffs, and read his rights. The cold metal clicking shut around his wrists marked the end of his 8 years of freedom. Neighbors watched from windows, some filming on their phones. Within minutes, images of the long-time suspect being led into the back of a police car were spreading across local news networks and social media. The arrest was quiet, efficient, and undeniable. At Sheriff's headquarters, Sheriff Briggs received the confirmation call. He stood in his office, staring at the old, faded photo of James and Sarah on the caseboard. "We got him," he whispered to the empty room. Elena Cruz walked in, her face showing the strain of the long investigation, but her eyes alight with a hard-won victory. Now it's over to the prosecutors and the courts. But at least the Reynolds family will see him face justice. That evening, the news was unavoidable. 2015 cold case breakthrough. Marcus Boone arrested in double homicide of Reynolds couple. Nashville residents flocked to the community center, holding candles not just in memory, but in a vigil for justice finally being served. For the community, the arrest was not just a legal action. It was a collective catharsis, a promise kept after 8 years of silence and pain. Justice, though delayed, had finally arrived. The trial of Marcus Boone began on February 12, 2024, at the Davidson County Courthouse. From the early hours, hundreds gathered outside, many holding pictures of James and Sarah Reynolds. After 8 years of waiting, they wanted to witness the moment the accused killer was held accountable. Inside the courtroom, the air was thick with anticipation. Every eye was on the defendant. Boone, now in a suit provided by his public defender, looked older, his hair grayer, his once defiant posture now slumped. But his eyes still held a glint of cold defiance. The prosecutor for the state of Tennessee, a formidable woman named Angela Rossi, stood and addressed the jury. Today, we are here to talk about a secret buried underwater for 8 years. We are here to talk about stolen lives. About 2 people, James and Sarah Reynolds, who were brutally murdered and whose deaths were staged to look like an accident. The evidence will show that the man who did this is sitting right there. She pointed directly at Marcus Boone. Rossi presented the evidence methodically, like building an unassailable wall. First, the DNA, the blood on the Fusion's dashboard that matched Boone's. She held up the lab report, pointing to the official seal. Science does not lie. This places the defendant directly inside the victim's vehicle at the time of their deaths. Next, she presented the phone records, the call from the Reynolds phone to Boone's at 11:05 p.m., and the cell tower data placing his phone near the lake moments later. He wasn't home asleep. He was at the scene, and they were calling him. Then, she showed the traffic camera image of Boone's Ford Explorer on the road to the lake. This is the defendant's vehicle. There is no mistake. She read the witness statements from Brenda Shelton and Harold Benson, both of whom pointed to Boone as the angry man they saw that night. She connected it to the financial motive, the $12,000 deposit after the disappearance, juxtaposed with James's empty wallet. Finally, she played the recording from his interrogation, highlighting his slip about the car's windows, knowledge only the killer could have. Boone's defense attorney argued that the DNA transfer could have been incidental, perhaps from a previous encounter. He claimed the $12,000 was a legitimate, albeit poorly documented, business transaction. He tried to dismiss the witness statements as unreliable after so many years. But Prosecutor Rossi dismantled each point with sharp, logical precision. If it was a previous encounter, why was his blood found inside the car they died in, on the night they vanished? If the money was legitimate, where is the paperwork? If the witnesses are unreliable, why did they independently identify the same man? The most dramatic moment came when Liam and Noah Reynolds, now young adults, took the stand. Liam spoke directly to Boone, his voice steady but filled with raw emotion. "You took our parents. You made us grow up without them. I will never forgive you for that." The courtroom was utterly silent. After days of testimony, the jury retired to deliberate. The wait was agonizing, but it lasted less than 6 hours. When they returned, the foreperson's voice was clear and firm. On the count of the first-degree murder of James Reynolds, we find the defendant, Marcus Boone, guilty. On the count of the first-degree murder of Sarah Reynolds, we find the defendant, Marcus Boone, guilty. The courtroom erupted. The Reynolds family embraced, sobbing with relief. Outside, a bell in a nearby church began to toll. Marcus Boone, his face ashen, showed no emotion as he was led away in handcuffs, the final vestige of defiance finally extinguished. On April 5, 2024, Marcus Boone stood for sentencing. The judge listened to impact statements from the Reynolds family and reviewed the overwhelming evidence. Marcus Boone, The court finds that the crimes you committed are among the most heinous and calculated that I have ever encountered. You not only took 2 lives, but forced a family and a community to mourn for 8 years without answers or closure. He was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. The long, dark mystery of Percy Priest Lake was finally solved. Justice, though it had taken 8 long years, had spoken for James and Sarah Reynolds. For Nashville, it was the end of a painful chapter, a testament to the fact that some secrets, no matter how deeply buried, will not stay hidden forever.